Are you ready to make some bakhoor on your own? Let's go. My name is Neve. Welcome back to Aromatics. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be making our own bakhoor. If you didn't catch my video on bakhoor and the insides and outs and kind of breaking it down, the different forms, ingredients, and all that stuff, I'll link it somewhere above where you can go and check that one out. There's some decent information, decent amount of information. And today, basically what we're going to do is make our own bakhoor. So I'm going to try and do my best to take you guys with me and show you guys what it's going to be like. Today, we're going to be working with a couple of raw materials like sweet myrrh. We're going to be working with myrrh itself. We're also going to be working with some ambers and some frankincense and dragon's blood. The other things that we're going to be working with include things of oil, and you can check down in the description. I'll do my best to link a lot of these products and ingredients that you're going to need. So the other recommended products that you absolutely need is going to be some types of oils. I highly suggest a oud-based oil fragrance and maybe some form of musk. Other than that, you don't want to overkill it, especially if this is your first time. But let's just go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so even though this isn't the cutest presentation in the world, this is the amber. I managed to crush it. I just smushed it into this finer grounds. And it's actually really easy to mush. The oils that we're going to be working with today, the fragrances, this is an essential oil, so it's going to be stronger than anything perfumed. We're going with vanilla. We're going to use a little bit of cardamom. We're going to use some dragon's blood, which adds a nice bit of depth to it, as if it didn't have enough. This is honestly going to be pretty filled with aromas anyway, just because of all the naturals here. It's going to be ambery, it's going to be honeyed, it's going to be sweet because of the sweet myrrh, and then a balsamic. And we also have those dark resins. But the one thing that it's not going to have is any like too much of an oud scent. So what I'm going to do is add an oud or an oud oil, and this is called dihin al-oud. So we're going to add a hefty dose of that. I'm considering doing some cardamom, but we'll see how it smells while we're cooking it. So basic steps is we're going to start off with obviously turning on the heat. You don't want to put any oil or anything like that on the pan. You're just going to take some sugar, about 1 cup of sugar. We're going to eyeball it. So that's about 1 cup of sugar. And it really depends on how much ingredient you're going to use. So I'm going to personally do 1 cup of sugar. You can add the rose water now. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So probably about half a cup of the rose water for the 1 cup of sugar. So we got that. We're going to allow it to caramelize a little bit. All right, guys, so basically what we have here is about 1 cup of sugar. Actually, it's about 2 cups of sugar to 1 cup of rose water. This should yield a lot of bakhoor. And I mean, let me show you guys the prior batch that I made. So this was off of half of that. So 1 cup of sugar and about 3/4 to half a cup of rose water. So when you first pour it in, it's gonna look a little bit like this. So don't worry, it should reduce, and as it reduces, it will become a little bit more thick and caramelized. Reducing just basically means that some of the liquids are gonna evaporate, turn into vapor when you see it bubble up. And as the liquids evaporate, the thickening stuff like the sugar in here is going to be more concentrated than the liquid, and then it'll get a little bit denser. So the raw materials that we're using here today is dragon's blood from the trees of Socotra in Yemen. We're also using sweet myrrh from Yemen. This is also from one of the resins. It's opopanax, for those of you who don't recognize it as sweet myrrh. And then we have myrrh Yemen as well. So this is straight up myrrh. And then we've got white copal. So we've got white copal here. I've also already grounded up some of this raw materials. There's some frankincense. You don't want to use too much, just because the frankincense can come off a little bit balsamic and overpower everything else. We've also got a mess here, a lot of a mess for sure. This is myrrh, and then we've got dragon's blood here. I don't want to do too much because the last batch I put way too much. The myrrh, ground myrrh there. And then not only that, but the one thing you guys have to consider is that if you're not using a freshly made batch of rose water at home, then you want to definitely consider the fact that if you make it naturally or at yourself, which is fairly easy. The easiest method, get it off of Amazon. I'll put something down in the link. Rose petals, you can get some organic ones. You boil it like tea, you let it sit, let it simmer for a good, little while, and this is the color that it will yield. Rose water you buy from the store will be clear, and it won't have as much concentration or as much scent as this. So because we're using a lot of raw materials with the first batch, I tried to do a little bit too much. Vanilla, cardamom, dragon's blood, Cambodian oud, and then some regular oud. It was too much. So my suggestion for that would be to, if you're working with more raw ingredients, like all of these grounds, use less oils. For the most authentic style oud, you want to just stick to something like dihin al-oud. So dan al-oud. Maybe some vanilla. I will definitely use a little bit of vanilla, and I'll include some dragon's blood oil just because of the fact that we're running low on the dragon's blood and I really don't feel like grinding anymore. I'm going to ditch this fragranced. Most of them are fragranced. So the more essentials, the better, obviously, but they are more fragranced. So essentials are going to smell much more. When you start going into perfumed oils, which is okay, and believe it or not, almost all of the bakhoor that you buy locally is perfumed, you're going to start to notice that it's really going to be a little bit too much. So this is the dihin al-oud. We're going to use this whole vial, and it's really not that expensive. This is likely to be an oud blend. It's about $20 for a vial like this. Believe me, it's good enough. And then a lot of people are like, oh, what about misk? So you can use misk, white musk, musk tahara, and basically it's going to just contribute like a nice cleanliness. So I will be using this entire blend or this entire vial as well. So this one, that one, a couple drops of the vanilla because it's going to be stronger than these. These are fragranced oils where this is essential and so is this is essential. This will be pretty concentrated in the rose fragrance as well, so you don't really need to add too much rose scent. Now I know a lot of you gentlemen and ladies probably want to do something like jasmine and rose, but don't go too crazy with your first batch. I highly suggest your first batch, make it nice and simple, stick to maybe a white musk and just straight up oud. If you want to go crazy with vanilla, try it, but when you have raw ingredients, really you don't need too much. So aside from all of that, the one thing that I will say I'm going to use here that's a little bit more fragrance is going to be honey amber, and the honey amber is going to contribute a bit of a sweetness, and this stuff is a little pliable, so you might be able to crush it with your hands. I don't know. Yep, no, I'm not that strong. So what you can do is this, as this is reducing, I'm literally just going to use the bottom of this to just crush it up a little bit. All right, so I used the back end of this, the butt end of this, to basically just smash it up. The more ground, the better. This is starting to reduce. As I said earlier, reducing just means the vaporization of some of those liquids. And as you guys can see, it is getting a little bit denser and thicker. So for those of you that are just starting, don't make this complicated. The rose water, you can really buy it from the store. This is gonna cost you maybe about $11 if you buy the rose buds. You buy the rose buds, you boil the water, you let it sit, you let it simmer, now you've got rose water, okay? Some of these resins, you don't need all of them. You can really just go with some resin like frankincense and maybe some myrrh. That's good enough. 2 resins are great. If you really wanna go with something that's traditional, I would highly suggest doing exactly that. As far as the woods that we're going to be using as the carrier or as the fragrance absorption, or what we're going to use for the fragrance absorption, it is unrealistic, and believe it or not, they do not use actual oud when they make bakhoor, because oud on its own is burned on its own, but rather you're going to use something like red sandalwood. They do have Palo Santo and they have regular sandalwood. I would highly suggest going with the sandalwood over the Palo Santo, just because it's going to be a more neutral type of fragrance. So you see here that we have about 0.25 ounces. We're going to use 2 bags of this. It's not much. Don't go too crazy with the measurements. Really, if you overdo the water, you could always add more sugar. And if you overdo the sugar, you can always add more rose water. So don't make it the deal breaker. It will happen. And if you let it just simmer, it'll eventually caramelize. So the longer you leave it, the longer it will, or the more likely it will get caramelized, okay? So basically once this ends up happening, we're gonna wait until it's caramelized, and that's when we're gonna start adding all of our dry ingredients. So the sandalwood, the oils, everything is gonna go in once this is done caramelizing. So I'll see you guys as soon as it's done. All right, so it's officially done caramelizing. You do wanna make sure that you mix it frequently, just so it doesn't actually burn. So here you guys see, it's pretty caramelized in texture. I did not add anything else to it, but now what we're gonna do is we're ready to add our materials, our dry materials to it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is maybe add some of the amber, and the amber is a little bit pliable, so you wanna just make sure you scoop all of it. This stuff is not cheap, you guys, not cheap, but the end result should be worth it. And that's why you really wanna make sure that you don't overdo the oils, because you could always add more, but you can't take out any. So we've got some of that dragon's blood, smells really nice. Smells slightly vanillic resin. Smells like a darker vanillic resin. Then we've got some of this myrrh that we're gonna add here. Similar. Smells really nice. We've got some of this frankincense. I don't want to do too much of the frankincense. That's more than enough. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some of this fragrance oil. See if I can get it to drop. Yep, there we go. We're gonna put the entire 5 ml vial. So for the price point for $20, really you're not gonna find anything that's crazy authentic, but you definitely can find something that smells like oud and possibly uses a decent amount of oud. So there you go, we've fragranced it with some oud because we are using sandalwood. And unless you're buying your Bakhoor for like over $500, then you likely do not have any oud chips, real oud chips in there. They do, some places will market it as aqualaria or agarwood, but really when you go to find out the source, they either don't know or it's not actually the oud that we burn as oud. So don't be fooled, because I know that that is definitely something that almost all of them do. They will market it as that, but really it could just be a form of gaiac wood, which is also Palo Santo. It's just another type of wood. So here we go, we're adding the white musk. The one thing that I noticed is that I'm not adding any sweet myrrh to this one, but that's okay because we've got plenty of resins in here. Used all of this musk tahara, and I got this from Maison d'Orient. By the way, you guys can get it from anywhere, all of these ingredients, and I'll do my best to link some of the ones that I would personally purchase. And then now we're gonna just go ahead and throw in all of the woods. It's about 1 gram or half a gram. What is this? Actually, no, half an ounce. So it's about 1 ounce. All right, now we're gonna just mix it. It's already beginning to harden. Generally, you'll let this sit for about 2 to 3 days, not just for it to harden, but for these wooden chips to really absorb all of the fragrances. So this is Bakhoor. And so as you can see, this is getting a little bit too mushy, right? You see that we have some sugar, but really easy fix. Add a little bit more rose water. You don't want to overdo it. Just a little bit, there we go. And it would have been better if I did this while it was still a little bit warm. So if you end up with some sugar crystals and you feel like it needs a little bit more liquid, what you can do is add more rose water, but you're gonna have to turn the stove back on. You wanna keep the stove at like a low, because now we've already added some of the fragrance, and if we keep it on a medium to high, it's going to start to burn some of that fragrance, and you definitely don't want that. So I'm gonna leave that flame on until it reduces just a little bit more. It would have been ideal or more ideal to, you know, do that process prior to, but it's okay. It's not the end of the world. So this is a good way to show you guys how to fix this problem if you do come across it. So as soon as I got the texture and the consistency back to how it should be, I turned the flame off and we're gonna allow this to dry back down. And as it dries, it's going to harden. I already got my plate with the wax paper ready here, and as soon as it's nice and starting to get a little bit hardened, I'm going to transfer it over. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the consistency. I'm gonna go ahead and transfer it over onto the plate. And so this is what the final product looks like. It's still pretty warm. As this cools down, it's gonna start to harden. I would suggest leaving this for around 2 to 3 days. Reason we use the wax paper is because it uses like a natural wax film. You don't have to oil anything. If you oil it, you will definitely ruin this thing. The one thing that I have to note is this is my second time making this, but I will say that I'm beginning to learn that using essential oil vanilla is not a good idea. You would think that it's going to contribute a nice natural sweetness, but no, if anything, it's actually coming off a little bit medicinal. So the one thing that I would suggest, or next time do differently, is add all of those raw materials, add those oils that smell as raw as possible, like the Cambodia oud and that white musk, and maybe the dragon's blood, but that's it. That's all I would personally add. Obviously, your fragrances are up to you, but vanilla specifically, I don't know why it's coming off a little bit medicinal, and this is a natural vanilla. So next time, if I wanted something sweet, I might just up the honey amber for the next batch, or maybe just go with a fragrance oil that has a natural sweetness to it. Or instead of doing all of that, I would up the sweet myrrh, because you're not gonna get a better fragrance than when you're using the actual raw material. So that's pretty much it, guys. We're gonna let this dry down. This is batch number 2, and as you can see, batch number 1 is already beginning to harden. And yeah, this is going to be Bakhoor. So I'll leave this for another 2 days and I'll report back. All right, guys, so these are the 2 final products I made. This is batch 1. This is batch 1, as you guys can see. Pretty good shape, decent color. This is gonna take about 2 to 3 days for it to fully harden. And you want those wood chips to fully absorb the fragrance oils. And then with the batch 1, I noticed that I put just a little bit too much fragrances, learned my lesson, and I made batch 2. And batch 2 looks a little bit darker, smells a little bit better as well. With both of these, I realized that adding vanilla was a mistake. You don't want to add vanilla to Bakhoor. You really don't want to do that. It just added some kind of medicinal quality, and the vanilla that I have is natural, 100% natural. But regardless, it would have been way, way better with just the combinations that I had before the vanilla. So the oud, the rose water, and that musk smells fantastic. Regardless, I have 2 samples that I'm going to be placing here on the side, allowing them to harden. And although they did harden right now, they're still pretty sugary and a little bit soft. So I don't know how well they would do, but in about a couple days, I'm gonna go ahead and burn them and use them as incense. And I'm pretty sure it's gonna be the best incense that's really tailored to me. Instead of buying oud or Bakhoor that really just says Temple Oud or Somali Bakhoor and you have no idea what's in it, this is the best way that you're gonna know exactly what's in there. It's all trial and error. You should have fun with this stuff. I know I had a blast making these Bakhoors. It was quite a bit of a mess. But in all honesty, I think this is going to be worth it. Eventually, I know that I'm going to come up with my signature Bakhoor that is going to be passed down from generation to generation. At least that's the goal. If you enjoyed watching this video, do me a solid, scroll down, hit that subscribe button. Until the next one, peace.